Well, without further ado, we've got a pretty tight schedule, but I want to introduce Miranda Mobley and Shelly Dean. Miranda's going to start first, and Shelly's going to take over. But if you would, let's please welcome them.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Come over here. And then Shelly will come up whenever I finish. I hope to be able to share some general information. You received a couple handouts when you came in the room, and I'd like to share my thoughts on the right resume style and do's and don'ts. But I realize that you probably have a lot more questions that would be better spent time answering those. So I hope to leave plenty of time for any questions that you have. But have some general tips from my perspective. I've been in recruiting for about 8 years. There's several in this room that have a recruiting background, Kavanisha and Andrea and probably others. So this is my take on it, and they may have other preferences. The main thing I hope you take from this is to get feedback on your resume. It's so hard. I was here at the table. It's so hard for me to judge my own resume because I have so much personally invested into it. And so Sean was kind enough to open his resume up to me trying to be extra critical for this session. I was harder on his resume than I would be on others in order to hopefully give you all some feedback so you could see a before and after. And it's funny, now that I'm engaged, like I'll probably have monthly follow-up from Sean just working on his resume because I'm invested in his resume than my own resume. I've got a newer version than you all have because I just care about that resume. So just want to start with the resume purpose. In recruiting, I think I've been in recruiting for 8 years. So the main thing is we look at resumes all day, every day. Andrea, I don't know how many resumes she looks at a day, probably 50 to 100 resumes a day. And so it's important for us to realize that a recruiter spends, in all reality, as harsh as it may sound, about 5 to 20 seconds on your resume. And so you put a lot of great information, expecting them to read all of it, you wordsmith everything that you've done, when in reality, we're looking for certain keywords, industry, experience, job title, and if you're putting all your focus in the wrong areas, your resume could be being overlooked. I liken it to, I was thinking about it this morning when I was getting ready, it's kind of like a Google search. When you type in phrases and you get all these results that come up on Google, you're going to click on the one that seems the closest to what you're looking for, and you're going to start there. And then if you don't see what you want, you're going to back out and you're going to go try a few more links. That's how I kind of relate resume search to, is we're going to find the one that matches it most closely and spend our first amount of time in our first review there. We don't see what we want, we may broaden our search, and then we may broaden it even more. But to me, it's kind of like a Google search, just in terms that we all do every day, if that's a helpful relationship. So that resume purpose is to gain our attention, to gain the recruiter's eye, to get an interview. It's not to tell everything you've done, every job responsibility that you've had. It's not to restate your job profile. It's really to catch interest and then be able to earn an interview where you share more information. And then another thing, and then we'll get into the resume examples, is that you can cheat with a resume. You can cheat by having different resumes that highlight different experience. That's allowed. In our applicant tracking system at Aflac, we actually have the ability for candidates to upload as many as, I want to say, 5 documents. So they can have 5 different resumes out there, and we as recruiters will say, oh, okay, this is marketing. This is John Smith marketing, John Smith sales, John Smith project management. And we know that as you gain more and more experience, that experience really diversifies, and you can't list all of that after 5 years plus of experience. You can't highlight everything that you've done. And so you have to have different resumes to speak to different experience sets. So probably obvious, you probably already realize that, but every day I think we meet job seekers who they don't realize that. And they're selling themselves short by leaving out important things because they're trying to fit everything they've done into one page. So, if helpful, you got some examples from when you came in. You see the before and you see the after. I don't know if it's jaw-dropping comparison, but a few things. So, first thing is, the question that we probably get most often is 1 or 2 pages. I will say, and I would love others' thoughts on it too. I think you get as much feedback as you can. To me, it's not a deal breaker if you have a 2-page resume. I'm not, as a recruiter, going to say, well, that was a 2-pager, I'm not looking at it. I'm really going to say, is it worth the 2 pages, right? If is, everything I'm reading as a recruiter, is it selling me on why you're the best candidate for this role? And the longer it gets, the harder it gets to make that powerful impact with your resume. So you want it to be a powerful punch. I use that when Sean and I met, but I don't know how else to say it. You want everything on there to be selling you, and you don't want any clutter that's going to take them away from that specific job and why you're the most qualified for that job. And so if you have 2 pages, 3 pages, we've seen 20 pagers, not saying those were good ones, but we've seen them. But whatever the right number of pages, you are the judge for that, and again, get feedback on it. But the longer it is, the more difficult it can be at times to make that powerful connection to that opening that you're applying to. And so that's the first thing was we condensed Sean's resume down to 1 page. And with the goal of making it more powerful. He had statements, and Sean, thank you again for opening yourself up. This is not easy. I would not want my resume in front of you all right now, taking and using as an example. So I must say that takes a lot of openness and transparency. So thank you again for letting us use you as an example. But Sean had a lot of, if you look at this before, he has a lot of behavioral attributes and successes that he used in a summary, that he used in his experience. And then on a second page that he used in his attributes and accomplishments kind of area, affiliations, interest area, and special recognition. And so these little nuggets of information were kind of spread around. And as a recruiter, I was missing them. You know, my first thing, I skipped. Sean saw me take a first look at his resume. I really kind of skipped the summary because I really want to know what job titles he's had, what industry he's been in, what he's been doing. And so I really skipped that summary section. And so Sean even mentioned it. I was saying, we need to talk about this. He said, that was in my summary. I said, well, that might tell you something because I skipped it. Just out of instinct, I guess, because I'm really getting, as a recruiter, to the meats and bones of what he's done. Because as a recruiter, we know to look through the fluff. And so oftentimes that summary objectives, if it's wrong, it can be a lot of fluff, and we want to get to the meat of what you've actually done. And so we use that to say, okay, let's take that summary and shrink it down. And so on the after, you'll see that we just did a little summary sentence for Sean that, it's up here on the board too, okay. That would get to the point that he was trying to make. That he's had such extensive experience in many different areas of IT, programming, project management, people leadership, project leadership. And so we try to consolidate that into one powerful statement. I think oftentimes, an important point to make is that intro piece, whether it's a summary or whether it's an objective, be mindful of that because that can exclude you more often than it qualifies you for opportunities. What I mean is, if you say a marketing professional with desire to move into advertising management, and you're applying to a project coordinator in sales, then perhaps they may not think you're the most interested candidate. And they may overlook you for that because they have another person who says that they want exactly what they have to offer. So unfortunately, I don't see that objective statement be as effective as it could be because too often it's excluding them, it's hurting them rather than helping them. So if you are going to do some sort of summary or objective statement, make sure that it applies to the job that you're applying to, or just take it off. Like I said, I really zone in on professional experience and accomplishments. And so I automatically go to job titles first. And so we took all of Sean's information that was in his summary, and we moved it down to his behavioral skills and qualifications. So it's much more powerful, much more consolidated. If we want to get to the behavioral side of Sean, hopefully it's all right there, is the goal. And then his work experience is much more powerful and much more targeted to that title, or to that role. A few other things that we did, we consolidated it down. We started with the job title, and I hope it's on this version. Because, yes, okay, good. If you see on this before, the thing that stood out was his division, the company he was in, the division, and then, oh, by the way, if you look there, you can see in italics, kind of hard to see sometimes, he's a technical director. You know, that's impressive. That should lead the resume. That's what should catch my eye first as a recruiter. And so I just simply changed that around to where his job titles quickly shows his, not only the success he's had at TSIS, but the progression he's had at TSIS, which is a big thing that recruiters look for. We want to see that growth. We want to see progression in your field. And that shows to us that you're successful. Because again, we're just trying to get a quick 5-second understanding of you as a candidate from a piece of paper. So my minor change, but I think it can be powerful, and that's the one that's speaking for him rather than the division, which a lot of people may work in, but not a lot of people are technical directors. So that was another big change. Let me see of the other. Typically, what a recruiter will look for is that timeline of employment. Have you been moving jobs around? And if it's not very clear, they could, in their rush, mistakenly think those are 3 different roles. I don't think that would happen, but I don't like to leave anything to chance. So that's why I just added the full date up there by TSIS, 97 to current, so they can see if they look further or not, he's been with the same company for an impressive amount of time, a loyal employee to TSIS. Let's see here.
Is it? Sorry.
Yeah, please, William, thank you.
1997 is missing?
1997 is missing, and so I think that would be another iteration of improvement for Sean, is to add that 97 piece. I think he had another role there, which would just be another level of progression.
So we do need to include all positions? I mean,
You don't need to. To me, there's no, when it comes to a resume, it's there to gather attention. It's there to gain interest. It doesn't have to capture everything you've done. So to me, if I saw this, it doesn't bother me that 97 is not there because I'm sure it was just a role, maybe a program or analyst 1 or an entry-level position to TSIS, and then he's progressed on further. I think that it's a formatting thing. I think he didn't want to lose some of those accomplishments to fit it on 1 page, and so he left 97 out. Am I speaking correctly?
Yeah, so trying to get it down to 1 page is really where 1997 got left
Yeah.
off. So, and Miranda pointed out, originally you couldn't even tell that I'd worked there at 97. If you look at the before, I didn't include my total time there, so you couldn't tell. She's like, well, you've been there longer than you're showing. So that was why it was important to add the total time frame. Just trying to be concise.
Yep.
And actually, in doing a kind of recruiter skim, it first looked like you were at Total Systems 2008 and you worked somewhere TS2 data migration. It looked like 2 different employers at first. So
On the new or the old?
On the old.
On the old.
It looked like 2 separate employers. Because of where the I goes to.
So I think to answer your question, William, I think to me that's okay. We're gaining interest. He's obviously, I mean, I think if he can get it to fit on there, that shows a 4th promotion that he had at TSIS, which is good. It shows a 4th level, but sacrificing that formatting piece is, I think that formatting trumps it a little bit because we're still gonna, as a recruiter, I'm still gonna be interested in this growth, and then I can talk to him about it. Like, what were you doing in 97 at TSIS? You were at TSIS, it's not on your resume, but he's caught my interest because one thing I didn't mention at the very beginning, which I should have, is the first thing I do as a recruiter when I'm looking at a resume is if it comes up to where it's full screen, you know, when it's reading pane and you can only see half of it, I will zoom all the way out to see a full page together. I can't help it. And then I want to see, does everything line up? Is everything bolded the same? Are all the titles bolded and all the companies italicized? I don't care what it is. Do all the bullets have periods or no periods? I don't care either way. I just want consistency. And so I will look at that before I even read the content. And if it's all crazy, I may glance at it, but that's your first piece of work. And if that's how you do a resume, then that's how you're going to do a PowerPoint presentation, that's how you're going to do an executive summary. And so the most important thing to me at times is that consistent formatting. If it looks crazy, that's hard.
So, I mean, would you recommend sending it as a PDF? Because Word documents depend on what version you send it in versus what version somebody opens it in. It can change
I would.
drastically. Send it as a PDF.
I would.
Preserve that format.
Yes.
I would agree.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great catch, Shelley.
And to Shelley's point, if you look at the dates from my original resume, the dates kind of wave a little bit, and that's what I noticed. You and I talked about it, and when I went back home, I have a different version of Word than you have. So when I pulled it up, they're all right justified as they're supposed to be.
That's a great point. Yes. That's a great point. And what you could do, I do the same thing at work. Oftentimes I'll send a PDF and a Word doc, just in case if they're on right. And if they're on an iPad, the PDF shows better. So that's always a nice touch too, is if you're following up with an email to give them the PDF and the Word doc of your resume, and it shows another just touch of excellence. You know, every interaction is professional and exceeding expectations. I think that's a great point.
Tom, as a potential senior manager, director, at that level, your recruiter's expectations are, you should be definitely on point there. So those things can make a big impact, especially when you're trying to really kind of decide who are your top 4 candidates. And, you know, it's a representation of you as a recruiter because you're putting that to the hiring manager saying, I support this person being considered. And they may come back to me and say, their director, this is all, this is all this and line with commas here, what are you talking about? This is simple stuff, but it does.
Attention to detail. Yep, that work output piece of it. What other questions? I think those are the high points that I wanted to hit on. Purpose of the resume, gain the interview. You don't have to tell everything on the resume. Just get the interview and then you can tell everything that you want to tell. What other questions? You had some questions, Sean, that you said that you had. Did I cover those questions that we talked about?
I think you covered most of them. Is there anyone else that had any questions for Miranda before?
Yes, Alicia.
As a closer to recent college grad, I noticed that you put education at the very bottom, but having little experience, would you still put education at the bottom or put it at the top?
That's a good question. So you want to put, so in Sean's case, the experience is so strong, that's what you want, because you have to think, if I only have 5 seconds of their eyeballs, then I want them to look at this.
Right.
So whatever that is, you had a great GPA, Alicia, I know because I saw your resume. So you want to lead with that, right? But you also have good work experience. So I think it should follow closely, but because you're I'd say for most recent college graduates, it's going to be starting with education. And then one thing that I think is important is that I see wonderful resumes from students that are fresh out of college, that don't have a lot of experience, that have really good school experience. They may list that school experience. So if they were on a consulting team as a class project and they consulted with whatever company and developed a marketing plan, that's relevant experience. Now, don't call that work experience. Call it, work school experience or relevant experience. There's different ways you can do that, but that's a good point. Start with where you have the strongest edge, right? Whatever is going to make you the strongest candidate, that's what you want to start with. And so it may depend on the role, and it definitely depends on the experience level. Yes, back here, and then.
Oh, okay, sorry, Kat. You should punch. Two things. So it looks like you shrank down your bullet points for each job title. Do you have like a kind of rule of thumb there? And then second, as far as how many you should have. And the second question, I also noticed you changed a lot of his beginning words to a verb, which kind of seems to pull out something he did. So I'm assuming that was on purpose.
Yes. I think we were intentional with that. The main thing is I don't have it's all preference as far as the number of bullets. I think that I do know we did speak about the more distant it is from current, perhaps the less relevant it is. And so you kind of see more bullets in his current role and then it gets less and less. And I remember I did the same on mine because as I progress in my career, the experience I have in my more experienced roles is more impressive to where I want to be, right? And so what I did 5 years ago doesn't really qualify me for the roles that I want to. I'm really going to show more of my more recent experience because that's going to qualify me best for the next opportunity. So I think it makes sense to fully expand on your most successful accomplishments. And I think often that'll come from your most current role. And so I'd say, as long as you can give those highlights, I don't think you should do much more than what Sean has under his technical director. I don't think that would go much longer than that because the recruiter's not going to read it. Speaking candidly, they will read it once they have interest and they're preparing for the phone interview, and the hiring managers will likely read it. But to get that interest, you want to make sure you're giving that snapshot, not the full everything. You want to save some for that interview, but you want it to be, so the reason for the verbs is you want it to be the most powerful pieces of information. So every little line needs to be a wow to you.
Experience.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'll come back to you, Michael. Sorry.
Okay, I actually have two questions now. First one is, especially for genuine young professionals that are fresh out of college, how do you know what positions are appropriate to leave off the resume? Like, I spent 2 years waiting tables or whatever.
Yep.
And then my next question is for somebody like a Bruce or somebody that comes from a very, very technical or very specialized field, and you have to translate your skills into common parlance.
Yep.
What tips do you have for that?
Yep, good. So for the first question that you asked, I like to see that experience. I like to see someone out of college, when you talk about a recent college graduate, that maybe their experience isn't the most relevant. Maybe, I'll use myself, I worked in a pet store I started when I was 16, and I worked there for 4 years. So, and the store was called Wet Pets and Critters. So not the most professional sounding store. It was hard to get a credit card. It was just not the best store to start your career at. But I grew up, I started when I was 16, I worked there for 40 years, became manager of that pet store, which was just a real locally owned business in East Texas. But it showed that I was loyal and that I worked through school, I balanced school and work. And so and it taught me customer service. Some of the basics that I have to do today in customer service, I learned from an angry customer whose fish died. I learned how I approach that, and I apply it to situations today. So I like to see that experience, because customer service can come in any form. Whether we're working at a fast food restaurant, whether we're waiting tables, or whether we're in the customer service center at Aflac.
When do you know when it's time to drop that off your resume?
When you have experience to replace it. So I don't list what pets and critters on my resume anymore. That was a good day when that could come off. I was a happy person. But when I applied to Aflac, it was on my resume because that was the experience I had, and I was proud of it. But now on my resume, it's not there because I've replaced it with more relevant experience. So I think it's judging. You'll know, I try to keep my resume to a tight one page, and so as I have more relevant experience, things start to slowly fall off. My first position I had at Aflac is slowly falling off as I keep my resume updated, because I'm outgrowing it. You know, I'm gaining 8 years later, I've got different experiences, and so that's a judgment call. I think that experience is nice to have. One thing that's a good pointer is to combine. So if you waited tables at 5 different restaurants and the duties were all the same, then just put various, you can consolidate that and make it a very tight piece rather than have to list all those pieces. That's usually the most effective. And then for the more professional, technical, skilled resume, I think that's where a cover letter comes in handy. So if you know that your background may not be translatable, or maybe that it doesn't, this person, you worry that they don't understand the value that that experience has given you and how it relates to the business sector that you're applying to, then I'd say rely on that cover letter. I was looking at resumes last night for an MBA internship, and I was wanting to get more insight. I wasn't getting that from the resume. I looked at the cover letters, and then I was like, okay, I get it. I couldn't figure out why they wanted this specific role, and when I looked at the cover letter, it clicked for me. I was like, okay, I get it. They kind of summed it up for me. So I would rely on a cover letter if, for some reason, you don't feel like it's capturing your full picture, then that cover letter is a good outlet to do that. But we have, we have a strong military focus, a recruitment focus at Aflac, and we have people on the team that are very skilled. I rely on Andrea a lot to say, okay, convert this to corporate for me. How does this relate to corporate experience? So we have that on the team, thankfully, to where we can translate those resumes and understand the skill set that's coming if we don't have that understanding when we see the resume. So, Michael, and I'll come back to you. I don't know how we're doing on time either.
We're good.
Okay.
With the way our culture is today, with social media and everything being so personal, with Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of that, that seems a lot of times to bleed over into our resume based off all of our experience. All of a sudden, sometimes we add, our likes, our hobbies, pictures. When and where do you draw that line?
Yep, Sean and I discussed it. So I would say, I think I still see a lot of resumes that have hobbies on there, like fencing, golf, kites, sailing. I just see the most random hobbies, and, it doesn't speak to me, per se. That's a judgment call. Those things to me can come out in an interview. Like Sean asked about, can I say that I do what I do because I have a family, I have kids? To me, that's a professional maturity piece. Like if I'm being interviewed, I'm not going to say that I have a little girl, just because I don't think it's relevant to the job, and I don't want to give them information and show my lack of professional maturity and exposing them to information they don't need. If they ask me what motivates me, I must say my family, and they can take that to mean whatever they can take that to mean my parents, my husband. To me, I know it means my little girl, but they don't have to know that. So I think that there needs to be that professional maturity to know when to share certain information and when not to share certain information. And as a recruiter, I don't want to know certain things. We hear things on phone interviews all the time that we just keep on moving. We don't want to get into that topic. We can't help it once they share it, but we definitely don't delve into it or write it down. It's really wasted time talking about it because we're not going to do anything with it.
And that is that a lot of companies will do a quick search, and they can see on a Facebook or on that information if they're interested in finding out more personally about you outside of what your resume says professionally. There are outlets to add that if it's a company that finds that information valuable or important.
You sorry, go ahead.
Yep, sure.
If you're not actively searching for a job, how often do you update your resume? I feel like sometimes I've gone back and it's like, oh, I don't remember exactly what I did. I have a hard time articulating that.
That's a good question. I am not, this is do as I say, not as I do. I don't update my resume because I see so many resumes I don't like to. So I'm going to tell you what I'm not doing in just in full honesty. But I think ideally it's nice for your resume to keep up with your current role. So whatever role you're in, because you never know when an opportunity is going to come your way. And you hate to say, you know, we have job seekers all the time that say, I'm going to apply to that job, I've got to update my resume. And while they're spending 2 days to update it and then get it peer reviewed and then apply, we've already filled the position.
And a lot of times if you can't find, you know, if you have a hard time remembering what you did in that role or articulate, go back to your job description. It tends to have really good wording that you can start with and then kind of fill out for what you personally did in that job.
Yep. That's a good point. Yes.
I have a question. If Sean was a doctor, medical doctor, but he's not applying for a doctor position, what's your opinion on like him having a title like Dr. Sean Roberts on there? Or do you want to leave that off? Or like an attorney, like Esquire, do you leave that off? Or if they're not applying for in that field?
No, I like it. To me, I like that. You know, at Aflac, when I was a college recruiter, we would talk with, mechanical engineering students. Tab and I we worked together, and you know, what I would always say is, we can use you because you're smart. You're really learning some strong skill set. Just not how you want to be used. And so that's where, perhaps, if that's the case, and you're wanting to do something that's not in line with your specialization, then you probably do want to have some kind of summary as to why you're interested in this role. Because that's really the biggest question mark is, would they be happy in IT if they went to medical school? You know, why the change? A cover letter would help with that. That was the incident last night, was the student I was looking at for a strategy internship had a law degree. I was like, why is he? So when I read his cover letter, it helped me. So I didn't share that earlier, but that was the reason I was a little confused there. I'll be happy if I can answer any additional questions after the session. I'd be happy to, but I want to turn it over to Shelley. Afterwards, I'd be happy to make sure she has.
And actually, I like you to say, if there's some answers, something to recruiting standpoint when they have some of these. So having that social media presence and it being a professional presence, whether you're currently looking for a job or not, is important. So, you know, to have a professional picture, it doesn't have to be your headshot, but, you know, it could be your family or whatnot, but to keep it professional and to use, not to have 2 different profiles for your personal and your professional. I know there's a lot of advice out there to do that, but people kind of see through that. When you've got 2, it says, oh, she's coming up twice. Maybe there's something on that other one that she's not wanting to see. It's what your security settings are for, and your safety settings, is to limit who can see what parts if there are certain things that you don't want on there. And really, when you're in a professional setting, really shouldn't be at that point anymore. You know, go through there when you're a recent college grad, look through all these pictures one more time, because there may have been things that were appropriate that aren't anymore. And have your settings where you've got to approve anything before it's posted, because it may not be a picture of you out at a bar, but it may be an unflattering picture that you don't want up there for whatever reason. So make sure that before somebody tags you in a post, before somebody tags you in a picture, that you're getting to approve all of those. And then use that profile as a way to, you know, to market yourself to other companies. So Kat does a great job of it with other things she's involved in, you know, posting articles or posting links to other things that she has going on, whether that be YP, things that she's doing with her job or outside of her job, fitness things, other ventures she's in. It shows a really well-rounded person that is excited about what she's doing and really takes personally in everything that she's involved with and wants people to be part of it. It's a great way to show that. You know, Facebook is a great way to, if you've got, you know, maybe you're not a graphic designer, but you're interested in graphic design, or you're interested in photography and you're not, then put some of that work up there. Link to a blog, start an online, you know, portfolio of those kind of things that you can link to. And one mistake people make is they think, even if your profile is set as, you know, nobody can see it, that doesn't mean people don't have friends that are friends with you that can see things, because they do. I've had people call me and say, hey, I can't look at so-and-so's. I know you're friends with them, will you tell me? So people can still see your profile, regardless if you think they can or not. There are ways around that. And then LinkedIn is something that, you know, it's kind of the professional Facebook. It's Facebook with a tie, you know, suit and tie. So you've got, you want to keep your resume there, updated just as you would, and maybe more importantly than you would your paper resume, because recruiters can find that and seek you out that way. So when you get a new position, make sure you add that to it. You know, it doesn't take a whole lot of time, and sometimes it's easier. And then go back once you've been kind of settled into that and have some more kind of meat to put with it. Go back and keep it updated. See who's looking at you. I mean, it tells you, see why are those people searching you out? What's connected with them in your resume. Also updating your resume, it shows people that are getting on LinkedIn, it gives them another reason to look at you. And it may not be that you're actively seeking a position, but there may be something out there that's perfect for you, but you don't even know it's available yet. And locally, there are a lot of times, especially in smaller businesses, where jobs aren't posted, or they're posted, but they've kind of already been filled, and they have to post them. So to keep everything that you have out there really professional and upstate and fresh, opportunities can come to you, even opportunities that you don't know are out there. And, for me, I love my job. I love working at Media Marketing More. I've been there for 6 years almost, and the Ledger approached me about an opportunity they had in a magazine, and it was through, me essentially marketing myself through YP, doing things like this. And the manager in that particular department had wanted to meet with me about some YP stuff, and we did, and through our conversations, he thought, oh, well, she would be a great fit for this other position we had. Went in, did some research, some background on me, got online and figured out if there were any red flags, and there weren't. So they came to me and, said, hey, I want to meet again about this position, and, are you interested? And here's kind of why we think you're a fit, and the reasons that they thought I was a good fit for that, things they'd seen on my LinkedIn and things they'd seen on Facebook and through conversations they had with me or engagements like this where they've seen me or talked to me. So there's always that opportunity to get out there and market yourself and to make sure that your online presence is reflected in your personal presence. Then what you're putting out there is what somebody's going to get when they meet you and they see you. And so keep that in mind. It's you on the computer. And you want to reflect that because that's as far as some people are ever going to get. So if you guys have any questions, about specific online or, social spaces and how to use those, and you can speak to Miranda can speak to the recruiter piece of how they look at that.
I'll just make a comment. It's amazing to me what some people do put on these social media pages, because as an employer, I'm reading through and thinking, why in the world would they put that on there? Because they never die. It's there forever.
It can be, you've got to be careful if you're posting stuff about your business. If you're posting a link to an event your business is having, or you have in your profile that you work at, the Chamber of Commerce, and here are the kind of people you work with, and then your next post is something that maybe speaks directly opposite to what their vision is, it can cost you a job. Because you're affiliating yourself with that company and essentially you're speaking for them. So you've got to watch the balance of what you post personally once you make that connection to a company professionally online.
I was just going to mention, it's probably about a month ago, I just got to thinking about our MySpace stuff, because that was probably my high school era, and I remember having one, but I never remember what happened to it. So I was just going to mention that I actually did go on and find it, and it was linked to a email address. It was like college411.org. I don't know if y'all remember that old site to get like Hope scholarships and all that. So anyways, there's kind of a process to go through and get those things updated and taken off. But it wasn't anything bad. It was high school. It's nothing bad. But we now have professional LinkedIn and Facebook and all that. And at Merrill Lynch, everything is so regulated as far as what we can put online and how we can communicate with clients and prospects and things like that. So I was just going to say I'd recommend kind of doing a MySpace search, even though there's an app on your phone for it. I'd take a look.
I actually did that when I started working at the Chamber, which was my first job, and I moved back to Columbus after working at a PR firm in Tallahassee. I went and closed my MySpace. I wasn't using it anymore, and it gets spammed really bad. So once we stumble across it, I'd be like, oh goodness.
Well, that and when you...
But I remember it was a process.
When you Google your name, actually, your MySpace profile picture is one of the first things that comes up, even if you don't utilize it anymore, and even if you don't have the username, password, email that it was originally there. But they do have an email mailbox, and they were real quick to help me take it off, and if there was any questions or try to update it. So just a...
I just want to underscore the importance of keeping tabs on all those old ghost accounts, because they will come back to haunt you if you don't. Because as Mike so rightly says, nothing dies on the internet. It lives on forever and ever, ever. And those stupid things you did as a teenager that you think nobody will find may come back one day to haunt you.
And that's the importance of these, having, your security settings where you approve everything before, because some high school friend maybe doesn't, or somebody you knew that doesn't have a job, doesn't care, go tag people in pictures, can post things, stuff that you just don't want on your your professional, your pages.
Is that something under your settings tab
It
and
is.
things like that?
It is. It'll allow you to send you your notification anytime you're tagged in a picture and a post, and you just click approve, and it'll post it right to your page. So that way it kind of puts that barrier, in case it is spam of some sort that is not up there, or if it's, just an unflattering picture, or somebody that your friends was tagging you in something that really isn't relevant to you, and you don't want all those posters on your wall of like great, sayings for the day. So, that it just kind of helps declutter that also.
Shelley? So obviously LinkedIn is a great way to market yourself. What sites are out there that you recommend for looking for career opportunities? So Career Builder, stuff like that, Monster.com. What's being utilized the best these days?
I mean, those, and you can kind of speak to where, because I know you talked about a lot of y'all going with LinkedIn now, those are still viable options. Tend to a lot of be for our more entry level kind of positions. Then the kind of higher up you get, the more going to company websites and finding them in word of mouth and really working your way through and finding out what's becoming opening. But you may speak to that better.
From my perspective, there's two places that we look for candidates. We look for active candidates that are on Career Builder, Monster, those job boards. But really, to us, the best finds are those passive candidates, probably like a lot of you, happily employed, not looking for anything, but if approached, could be swayed. We all could be swayed, right? I mean, so that's who we look for. I mean, that's really our best, is to get someone happily employed, because they're usually the best employees. And so for that, we use LinkedIn. So we use both. We will actively seek those. As a job seeker, I think it's good to have your profile updated on LinkedIn. There's jobs that we'll post to LinkedIn. We post a couple key jobs to LinkedIn, not a lot. LinkedIn is pretty expensive. I think they know they've got the corner on the market, and so they're pretty pricey. But I think more and more recruiting teams are putting more and more budget towards LinkedIn versus those other active candidate pools like Career Builder.
And there are, ones that are specific to certain industries, which obviously if you're in, a certain industry, that those are the ones. And I have a lot of success with headhunters and those kind of sites that'll kind of do it for you. But again, they tend to be very narrow, very industry specific once you've reached a certain level.
There's a great site for those that are actively looking for opportunities. You probably know it. It's Indeed. I love Indeed. It brings, not only does it scrape all of the job boards, but it scrapes company job boards, and so it's a good one-stop shop to see everything versus having to go to Career Builder, see the postings that companies paid for, and then the other companies aren't out there. Indeed is wonderful for that. Our jobs are out there just because Indeed scrapes our job board. So that's a good one, like catch-all, to see a lot more than you would see going to individual sites.
I was going to say, we utilize GageIn. I don't know if y'all have ever heard that. It's kind of like LinkedIn, but only for the business, and it's on like steroids. So anytime Aflac gets mentioned, it pops up in this, because we use it for other, stocks and different research and things like that. But I was just saying, they do have a lot of jobs that come up, this position, somebody just moved out of this position, they'll announce that, they'll have the names of the people that moved roles. It's just GageIn.
But G-A-G-E?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's new. It's not real, it's not real regulated yet. I know that because Merrill Lynch is real regulated, but it's got almost every company, even real small companies that we deal with in Atlanta. So it's interesting. It's a really good website to look at.
Thank you for sharing.
Going back to the initial resume, is it good either way to do a cover letter? And I hear a lot of people doing that, and sometimes you look at it and you're like, all I know they did was just drop my name in the top. That's all they did.
That's what I was going to say. My cover letter is the same one I used coming out of college, and so I just stopped attaching it. I just don't use it anymore.
Yeah, I wouldn't use it. I can tell, like when I get a canned thank you or a canned cover letter, I can tell that because we see them all the time, and I think the same templates get used over and over and over again. So if you're going to do it, then make it speak for you. Make it talk the way you would talk. Make it be your brand. versus using a canned template that we all learned in business school that's not as appropriate perhaps, or it's very obviously canned. I like a cover letter. What I would say is, I don't personally have a cover letter. I don't think I used one, so again, I'm kind of being hypocritical, because Aflac doesn't require a cover letter. Bless you. But I do think if you're competing against somebody who has a really well-written cover letter and communications being as important as they are in today's business environment, then I'd hate for you not to have that competitive edge.
What would be the role or the goal of your cover letter? Is it to tell the story, or?
I think so, and to tell the story of why you for this role. Not just to tell everything about you, but to say why should you be considered a top candidate for the marketing manager role. And then you may have a good diversified background, and that may be why you're such a great candidate. So it's to help them, it's your sales pitch in my mind. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I read it and reread it kind of thing, and just say, do you stand out? Do you feel good about it? Do you feel like the cover letter makes you someone unique and interesting? Would you want to interview you? Because if it's boring and it's bland, then you're blending in. And I don't know if it's making the impact you want it to make. The other thing I would say is that cover letters, I like them. They're not a huge deal for me. I'm not going to promise I'll always read them in depth. But I will say, too, that if it's an HR position, if it's a manager position, a director role, I feel like it's a formality that's a given that you should know to do. Whether I read it or not, the expectation is that you should know to give one, because that's going to create that presence of you're a leader and you understand these formalities that go along with that. Does that make sense?
Yes. I don't know which one.
I had a question about LinkedIn. I'm familiar with how to use Facebook and Twitter to my advantage, but I am at a loss as to how to use LinkedIn. What to do? What kind of activities do you do?
There's a couple of different kind of ways. First of all, to upload, and you can literally upload your resume and then go through and kind of fine tune it to fit what LinkedIn has. You can join groups that are specific to the industry you work in or the industry you're interested in. You can post things to those groups, whether they be interesting articles. I get an email every week, every day, with things in public relations and fund development and that sort of thing that are very interesting that I get from LinkedIn that they kind of aggregated from different sources that I could repost, and it kind of puts me as an expert in that area when I'm reading these articles and then I'm reposting, whether it be to Facebook or to other places. To make connections with people in your area. Don't just ask, to connect with somebody without any context if you don't know them, just because they are the recruiter or because they're the manager somewhere you want to be. There needs to be some context around it, and to be selective on your connections. People are just asking you to connect and you don't know who they are and you don't see any connection between you and that person. Maybe you just leave that pending. And sometimes it happens, you're like, click and be like, oh, that's who that is. Because you don't want to end up with just a bunch of random because then it's not as valuable. Because the people that you want to see this information aren't seeing it. So really to keep your resume to be searchable so that recruiters and things can find you to maybe join some of these groups that have relevant information in your field and read those and can post to those when you find it relevant.
Okay, so basically just posting articles and things.
And reading what they posted, and then and then posting to those certain groups. But the most important thing I think on LinkedIn is keeping that resume up there, keeping it, fresh and up to date, and then making the connections with people that can help you and that are relevant.
I don't think you have to be as active in LinkedIn as you do in Twitter, for example. It's more so an online resume to me, and connection network. So who do you know that I know? Who's endorsed you that I know? Because people can endorse you or recommend you on LinkedIn, and then they can also endorse you for certain skills. And so you can see, wow, this person, especially like in Shelley's industry, it's very important, I think, for when we are looking at marketing or sales talent, they need to be strong in that space, because that, to me, where everything is going. And so for someone, I think a lot of it depends on your industry too, as to how active you are. So Shelley should probably be more active than someone that's in IT, maybe, because they should be using those avenues and be experts in those avenues. But I think regardless, an online profile and connecting with people in your industry and maybe recommending or endorsing some, and that way you get some back too, will start to make your profile stronger and stronger. Yes.
And to her question, I've also found LinkedIn to be a good learning tool as well. Like she was saying, if you were to join a specific group to your industry, like for HR, for instance, I've seen groups that have talked about, people that were new to the industry, new to HR, how do I start a one-person HR team? And then people will post and kind of give their input on how to do that. So it's also a good learning tool as well.
And LinkedIn's pretty good about sending the emails kind of with all the, 10 or 12 articles, everything kind of in one email, so you don't feel like you're just inundated with, stuff every day from them, and kind of to filter through that email, find out what do you want to click on, what do you want to see about those groups or join that.
Yeah, I suppose because I have Aflac listed as an employer, I get insurance updates insurance industry updates every week.
You can change those in your settings and in different things on LinkedIn too, so it's, you're getting something that's more relevant to your department within Aflac instead of just the insurance size.
I would also advise you to, if there's an industry you want to get into or something that you're interested in, get in those groups too, because that's how you're going to make some of these passive connections to get whatever the next step is in your career.
Yeah, recruiters are joining those groups. Our recruiters are, I'm sure Andrea is in a lot of marketing and sales broker type of groups because she recruits that audience. So
I don't know anything about it.
but she's in there, she's scoping them
But
out.
I'm in there, and I'm reading, and I'm seeing what people are doing.
But our recruiters are every day in those groups.
So I do have a question though, because, you hear this all the time. It's kind of like the elephant in the room when you're in a position you're looking for a job. Columbus very much is a town where it helps to know somebody. So we spent a lot of time talking about tools to get noticed when you're doing active search, but when a passive search is going on behind the scenes, how do you compete with that?
Well, and that's why I think having that online presence, so that your Facebook, profile or your LinkedIn or, whatever presence you have is something that people notice. And so your sample pack is very good at that you are posting things that are relevant to what you do, but also that are bigger than that. And so people are looking, you're involved in things like YP and those kind of organizations, so that when those passive searches are going on and your mind goes to people you see the most and people that, and seeing them doesn't mean necessarily always face-to-face, but online, are they things that you find interesting and that you feel like they would be a good, worker? And then maybe it's a phone call to somebody they work with and say, hey, so-and-so's looking for a job. I was thinking, Kat may be a great fit. What do you think? And to get some feedback. And so the more you can put yourself out there and kind of make a name and a presence, the more you start coming to top of mind for those. And eventually there will be, a great fit. And people know that, you can't, how to approach you and how to talk to you about a job without, jeopardizing the job you're already in.
I was just saying, I think it ties back to Michael and Sean's theme, which is your brand. And so the resume is a piece of it, but it also goes to your network, it goes to social media, it goes to your involvement in the community, everything. If Michael sent me a candidate and said, hey, this is somebody I talked to in YP, I'm already impressed because they're part of YP, and then they're coming to me via Michael, and he says, I think this is somebody really sharp, you should talk to them. It does offer a sense of credibility in comparison to John Doe, who I don't have that kind of background history with. And so, but Michael also wouldn't abuse that relationship. That's important too, because I know when he does that, it's somebody I really need to take notice to, because he saves that for someone he supports.
Two things. One, I want to plug YP because my wife just got a professional job as a nurse through a relationship that I developed through YP. So kudos to YP. And two, what about your headshot? If you have two LinkedIn accounts and you see a photo, one is I'm at the club, and the other one is a professional. I mean, how much does that play into it for you?
I would say especially on LinkedIn, but even on Facebook, your headshot needs to be professional. Now, you may have a little variance in that depending on the industry you're in. You see my headshot. It's not, I'm not against the blue screen, but being in marketing, that's actually my headshot for the magazine. Like, I have a little more freedom than somebody that, maybe is in a little more corporate setting, but you're never going to picture me dancing at a club. Like that even happens. If it did, definitely not. Yeah, I think that Facebook can be more personal. We don't
we don't encourage Facebook for recruiting or any social media outside of LinkedIn. And so we actually discourage that from the recruiting team and then also of our hiring managers. That doesn't mean we can stop our hiring managers from looking on Facebook, so I think it's good for us to be mindful of that. But I think it's good to have a real picture of yourself on Facebook, and maybe LinkedIn is a little bit more professional. Again, I don't know if I'm the shining example of that, but
You know, Facebook having a picture of your family maybe is,
Yep.
appropriate,
Yep.
but on LinkedIn, you
Yep.
wouldn't want to use that same picture. You want to use a more professional headshot. And another reason Facebook, in addition to LinkedIn, may be helpful, like Kat, you're talking about with passively looking for a job, so they can see who your connections are with, on Facebook, who you're friends with. People start making those phone calls without you really knowing to see about, so you were friends with Kat on Facebook, can you tell me a little more about her? So, keeping those connections and that stuff up on both sites is important.
I think another point too, I'm sorry, Shelley, I just thought of it too while you were speaking, is you mentioned it earlier, and I think it applies here, is making sure it's really who you are. So if all your pictures are very professional shots and very poised, and then you come in and you're not poised, you're not professional, don't sell them on something that's not true. So be whatever your pictures are, I think is the most important thing, because if that's what's getting you the interview and you're not following up on it, then you're not doing yourself any favor. So I think reality, that is the most important thing.
I want to thank our, excuse me, I want to thank our speakers today. Miranda and Shelley, y'all did a great job.